Okay, so to me, I personally feel it's everyone's responsibility. If you understand something and it is for the greater good of all of us, it is our responsibility to pass that on to others. We can take our flame, our torches that we are all holding of this knowledge and light other torches as we go along. This is something that we must do.
Thank you for our freedom, Basilico.
We hope more people will follow suit.
Very good food.
This is about exercising our liberty and our freedoms.
But the freedom is what brought me here.
You gotta take off your mask, though.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you gotta take it off. Yeah. You gotta take it all the way off. There you go. There you go. Enjoy. You know, I didn't pick this fight. You know, they did. I don't call it civil disobedience, what I'm doing here. I don't call it a resistance either, because we're attacking. We're attacking the enemy. You're not gonna win by being quiet about it. There's a lot of businesses out there that think that they're fighting, and they do it by having a side door open. That's not how you fight. You fight openly. There's no way in hell that I'm shutting anything down.
You rock, Tony. One thing that is consistent, despite the wide range of experiences, is that they all stem from understanding that something is wrong. Very wrong. Where's the mainstream media that should be reporting on this? Absent.
I think we are, each of us in our own way, working out what sovereignty looks like. If we're stuck in our childlike psychology, then we have a tendency to idealize authority because we're so merged that there's no possible way that authority could ever actually truly mean us harm. And it is the rupture of that idealization, which is itself the projected, what's called the good object, that we haven't owned yet, that we fuse with this parentified authority, and all of our self-judgment that we're not looking at gets projected on other people, right? So these are often the highly compliant citizens who are deputized to, make sure that other citizens are doing their part to be good and do the right thing.
Hello, officer. Thank you here to see me.
I'll talk to you outside.
I'd rather stay in here. These guys are not letting me.
No, you can leave that right here. I'll talk to you outside. And you can film still. That's fine.
Why can't I purchase the merchandise?
If they don't want you here, then
but
they
this is
ask you to leave.
They have open to the public.
Yep.
I didn't violate any law.
Okay, but if they don't want you in here,
I have a medical condition that exempts me from wearing a mask.
Okay, then show them to me outside.
Well, I don't have to prove anything to you.
Why are you shaking so bad about this?
I'm a little nervous talking to a police officer.
Okay. Well, this isn't a big deal, so let's talk about it outside. If they don't want you here, you're trespassing.
Right. Well, no, this isn't private property. I have a public right of way.
It's not private property?
They open their door to the public.
Okay, but they don't want you here.
That creates a public right of way. They can't just choose who to serve and who not to serve. It's discrimination.
So, sir, do you want to be escorted out?
I don't want to be escorted out.
Okay, then put your stuff here and talk to me outside.
You're supposed to protect my rights.
Yep, and that's what I'm doing right now, so that's why I want to talk to you outside.
I feel like this officer is not really respecting my position. He's going to force me not to come back in after this.
Perfect.
So can I just have your name and badge?
Yes, we'll get it outside. We're going to do that outside.
MF Yule, UHL.
Here, you want it? You can have it. Let's go.
2920.
Hey, don't push me. Don't push me. Hey, stop pushing me. Outside. You're not coming outside.
You don't have a reason to use force.
I didn't use force. Believe me, if I used force, you would know.
No store can make a policy that violates the law.
Okay, sir, do you have any idea that we're in an epidemic?
No city can make a policy that violates the law.
That's why they don't want you in here. Understand? That's why I'm wearing this, that's why he's wearing his.
I understand that the executive order has an exemption for people who are unable to tolerate a mask.
Then where's your exemption?
I'm telling you,
You don't have any proof, is what you're saying.
What do you mean? What kind of proof do I need?
I need something that says...
Why do you need that?
Because you're saying that you have some sort of disorder that you can't
put a mask on. I said I'm unable to medically tolerate a mask, which is what it says.
Okay, what's her problem?
She's just filming for me.
Oh, so you staged
So
this
it's a
whole thing?
stage, No, I'm not staging this.
Seems like it.
I want to have evidence that I was treated appropriately and that my rights were respected.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, this is private property. If they don't want you here, then you can't be
So
here.
aren't you aware that when a store opens their doors to a public,
But they can.
they have a public right of way. They can't.
Okay, and you're aware that you own a house, and if you don't want someone there, we have to come remove them.
I don't open the doors of my house to the public.
But I'm just
for business.
Okay.
Once they open the door to, I swear this is the law. You can check with your superior if you're unaware of this.
They don't want you here.
It doesn't matter if they want me to. They're discriminating against me.
No,
What's it say right there on the
They can
window?
ban you from the store for not following the rules.
I understand. So what if they put up a rule there that you needed to carry your shotgun to be admitted?
Right, but it's
if I
awesome.
didn't have
Awesome.
a shotgun, they couldn't let me in.
That's
without a
awesome.
shotgun?
That's a great example.
So if I went in there without a shotgun, they could kick me out under those circumstances?
That's not a state mandate. This is a state mandate.
I told you I'm complying with the state executive order. I have an exemption.
Okay, where's your exemption?
What do you mean, where is it?
Where's your
It's
note
in
from
my
your
body.
Where's your note from your doctor saying that
I don't need to share my personal health
No,
information.
you
with
do,
It's
because
protected-
everybody that walked in the store could
It's
say the same
protected
thing.
by
Do you
HIPAA.
not understand that?
Right in the law, it says in the guidance from the health department, it says that I do not have to divulge my health condition. I can show you on the webpage.
Well, if you're not going to comply with the order, then you do have to divulge your health condition. Otherwise, everybody would go around saying that they have a condition they can't wear a mask. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Your health privacy.
Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does that not?
Officer, your health information is protected by federal law as private.
Okay,
you
that's
do not
fine.
have to prove to anyone that you have a health condition.
But if you're not going to comply with an order,
No,
then you
even
do.
if I'm not, I am in compliance. I have an exemption.
What's it say right there on the door, sir? Just read that to me. on
That
the
is
door.
not law.
What's it say on the door, though?
It is law.
What if they put on the door that you had to wear
So
lipstick
can you not
to
read?
enter?
Can you not read it? What's it say on the door?
I can read.
Okay, what does
Very
it say?
well
I'm
educated,
asking you. What's
as
it say?
can tell.
I'll read it to you. All customers are required to wear a mask, covering both mouth and nose when entering the store.
Officer,
Were you doing that?
What if they put
Were you
on
doing
their-
that? You're not answering any of my questions. Were you doing that?
No, I was
No.
not doing that.
Okay.
What if they put on there you had to wear lipstick to enter?
Okay.
Would you be here kicking me out if I wasn't wearing lipstick?
No,
in
but
that
we're not in
condition?
Fantasyland either, okay?
I'm not in fantasy
What if
land
everybody
either.
walked into the store and
Tell
said,
me,
I'm not
you
wearing a mask
listen.
because I have a health
Is it
condition?
your job
Don't answer that.
to? Is your job to enforce the law?
I am.
Tell me what law am I violating?
The
What's the
executive
code
order
of
that
it?
says
Right now, they don't
That's
want
an
you here, so you're
executive order is
trespassing.
not a law. It's not
How's
passed
that?
by the legislature. You have no authority to uphold an executive order.
Okay, then you can go talk
So
to your local
tell me what
legislator about
law that I'm violating.
You're trespassing. You're not complying with the store
You can't-
policy. So therefore, you can't be in the
Okay.
store.
Are you just
Can
here
I-
to
Can I ask
to
you who
make
your,
this point
who your superior
or try to make a
officer-
point?
Can I ask you who your superior officer?
Yeah, sure. Chief Johnson.
Chief
Go
Johnson.
drive right down to the police station.
Okay. Do you have a phone number for Chief Johnson?
Why don't you just drive down there and talk to him? You'll need a mask.
Where is he?
He's at the police station.
Okay. It's down the road that way?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that.
Perfect.
All right. May I go on my way now?
What's your last name, sir?
I don't want to tell you that.
Oh, why not?
Why would I?
Well, it's an investigation. Don't you want your voice heard?
Did I break the law?
I'm going to document that this happened.
Are you detaining me?
Don't you want this documented?
Okay, let's go, Lauren.
These stores that are telling you that you can't come in, they are breaking the law. And when they tell you that it's their store policy, it doesn't make it lawful.
Oh, this is your truck? I'll just get it from this.
The government knows that it can't make these laws, so it's using the stores
It's all right. We can.
as the law enforcement to do so by design.
Wow, you got to dance around like
You know, it would really help if you take off the mask.
Have fun leaving, guys.
But I'm outside.
The governor made a law, the governor's new law, the governor's mandate. It is not possible. It is not possible, and it did not happen.
Thanks for fighting for our rights, officer. Great job.
The Constitution was created to prevent government from trampling on our rights. The governor, the president, these are executives. They enact the laws that the legislature created. Every government that proclaimed an emergency, whether it's the state, whether it's the county, whether it's the city, is eligible for CARES Act funds. But the fact of the matter is, this CARES Act money was supposed to go to small businesses that were hurting because they closed down. In my county, there are 5 supervisors, and the supervisor that oversees our region, instead of giving that money directly to the small businesses, she hired an administrator to study how that money should be distributed. And it turned out that instead of the businesses getting $10,000, $15,000, they would get $1,000 that they could apply for in a grant if They posted a sign on their window that said they were going to enforce masks.
Go read Article 6, Clause 2 of the federal Constitution. It's called the Supremacy Clause. The federal Constitution is supreme. It's the law of the land. It trumps state constitutions, and it trumps all municipal corporation ordinances and statutes and codes. The local stuff from the state down can never supersede the federal Constitution. Everything was created under the federal Constitution. Government was created for only one reason, and people don't understand this: to protect rights. That's it. They look like they're protecting rights right now. Doesn't look like they're protecting rights. Looks like they're trampling them right now. And they're doing that because the people have been dumbed down. They don't understand their rights. They don't know how to enforce their rights.
Mayor Bill de Blasio announcing an expansion of his vaccine mandate across the Big Apple earlier this week. The new mandate requires vaccines for all private sector workers without a testing option and requires children ages 5 to 11.
God, look how quickly this spun out of control from just them using a claim that there's a virus out there. Look what they've done to people.
Yes, let's take a look at what they've done to people. The Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency put in a Freedom of Information request for Pfizer's post-marketing data regarding their vaccine, but it was denied. So they sued the FDA, and now the document is available to those who care to seek it out.
This is a Pfizer internal document, proprietary and confidential. This covers the first 2.5 months of data. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, I'll move my cursor to that area, 1,223, that is the number of fatalities reported by people who received the Pfizer vaccine. The swine flu vaccine in the 1970s, that was taken completely off the market after only 50 suspicious deaths.
Within this document, there are 8 pages of injuries and deaths reported.
Acute disseminated encephalomyelitis is an acute swelling of the brain and spinal cord. Cardiac ventricular thrombosis, that's a blood clot inside the heart. Now, this is an amazingly exhaustive list.
How on earth is the public not absolutely livid over this? I mean, because they don't know. That's why. The media
That's exactly right. This has not been disseminated in the mainstream media. It's been suppressed. So this is the kind of information that is available to those who want to know the truth.
It is also the kind of information that would be admissible in a court of law. And for those getting fired from jobs, it might be worth the time to learn about your constitutional rights and the law.
Corporations are acting like tribunals, like they're courts. Basically, they're making medical determinations for people. They're making legal determinations for people, and they don't have that authority to do that. And when the attorney from the company writes you and tells you you've got to have a vaccination, well, we're going to go file bar grievance against that attorney. And we may file state criminal complaints against that attorney because he's exerting acts of ownership and title. He can't make legal determinations on his own by stating you've got to be tested, you've got to wear a mask, and you've got to have a vaccine. And what's going to happen is those agencies we file with, they're going to protect them people. You're never going to see anybody even get a slap on the wrist by you filing that stuff. But here's what you don't know, and this is the stuff that people need to understand. Anytime you file something against a public official or against somebody in a company, your boss, they got to tell the insurer that the insurer wants to know what's going on. So that all of a sudden somebody doesn't turn around, they're looking at a $100 million suit that the insurer's got to pick up. Even though these administrative agencies aren't going to do anything, the insurance companies are going to get notified. And we've seen more judges pull out of cases, attorneys pull out of cases, and policies change the companies because people have done this. Now, if one person does that, they're going to take notice. But if 10, 15, or 20 did that within a company, they're definitely going to take notice.
Unfortunately, the collective is choosing victimhood, mental illness.
So it's gone past just a kind of state of crazy fear intoxication, and it's evolved now into a more calm and more thoughtful self-segregation. And that makes a statement that I am in the in-group and you are not. Yeah! The more the self-identification process with the masks and all this distancing nonsense becomes absurd, the more clearly self-segregated, confident, and reassured people inside of that cult become. They're not thinking about how they're perceived by those that are outside the cult. They couldn't care less. What they care about is separating themselves as far away as possible from the actual reality.
What we see happening right now is a captured population, a good percentage of it, that have fallen prey to these tactics. And so they are not able to embody the purity of spirit. They are literally mind controlled.
A woman came to me yesterday and she said, I have an 8-year-old child in LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District. He said to me after school that one of his friends was brought to the front of the class and the teacher said, Davey has something he wants to announce to the class. Davey, would you please make your announcement? Today, I went and got my vaccine. And the teacher said, little Davey got his vaccine because he wants to protect you and your parents and his brother and his sister. He's keeping us safe by getting his vaccine. Everyone in the class, please applaud. Now, what did the boy do when he came home and talked to his mother and related this story to her? He said, why won't you let me get the vaccine so that I can keep people safe? Now, what is the mother going to have to do now that the child has been turned against her by the teacher?
They are being told by people in a position of authority that this is the right thing to do. This is where evil sets in. Because the nature of evil is to take something that is good and to turn it around and say that it's bad, and that something that is bad to turn that around and to promote it as something good.
Encouraging and allowing children to wear masks is tantamount to child abuse. When you have children who can't be near to one another physically and are unable to breathe and unable to see each other's faces, see each other's facial expressions, you are preventing their development from taking place. In early development, infants learn how to recognize human faces and what emotions are by seeing exaggerated expressions on the face of the mother all day long, and other mothers and other women and adults, just anybody really. They're missing out on that critical period of neural development. We don't have any idea what's going to happen because this has never been done before. We have never blocked the ability of an entire generation of children, of babies, to see human faces for 12 months. This has never been done.
We're social beings. We need affection. We need touching. It's healing. It keeps us emotionally healthy. It keeps us related. The social aspects of it, I think, is what is most difficult emotionally and psychologically for the children. I know from my own kids, when the lockdown first occurred, all of their close friends were no longer allowed to hang out with them. And this has continued since that point.
The psychological damage is going to be for a lifetime, in my opinion, in my professional opinion.
So we are now prevented from experiencing that. And when I get together with people who realize that these policies are detrimental, it's hugs galore. Everybody wants to hug each other because they're so starved for it.
can all see and feel the imbalance. It affects our collective consciousness and, of course, the health of the planet.
It also causes our individual internal terrain to suffer. In other words, we're not separate, but rather an integral part of nature.
Physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually.
The symptoms or the sufferings generally considered to be inevitable and incident to the disease are very often not symptoms of the disease at all, but of something quite different, of the want of fresh air, or of light, or of warmth, or of quiet, or of cleanliness, or of punctuality and care in the administration of diet, of each, or of all of these.
Pleomorphism, that's the way nature's processes work. We go through predictable phases.
You're going to see these little pinpoints get a little larger.
When I look under the microscope, I'll see these organisms in different phases, and they tell me a lot about the internal ecology of the body. It gives me a lot of clues as far as why people are experiencing certain symptoms, but more importantly, it tells me what I can do to help realign those processes and eliminate symptoms. Protids, when you look in the blood and you see a lot of these little glimmering sparkles, they are a sign of good health. Now, they will go from a little point of light under the microscope into a more of a circular object, and we call that a colloid. From there are other phases. You'll enter into a bacterial phase that perhaps your doctor would culture if you have a strep throat or some such thing and say you have streptococcus. What they're not appreciating is that is a bacterial phase that they mistake for a distinct entity within nature that exists solely in that state, but it actually comes from an organism within us that we call penicillin notatum. From the bacterial phase, depending on the terrain, because remember, these organisms have certain functions and they also adapt to the environment like all of us have to. From there, it might go into what we'd recognize as a fungal phase and so forth. And if the body is recruiting these organisms to go into these phases for a particular function, then what will happen is if the terrain is in balance and has all the resources necessary, it's going to do its job, and then it's going to go full circle and revert back to its protid stage. Every stage of that cycle has a purposeful function to provide a service for the terrain. In those stages, they all produce enzymes and things that make us feel not that great, raise our temperature, inflame mucous membranes, make our body upchuck in different ways, but that's its purpose. And we erroneously label that as disease. And then if one of these organisms is found at the scene of the crime, then we say that created a disease. We take antibiotics. Sure enough, it dampens down that level of the cycle so that the symptoms disappear, but you impeded what it was trying to do for your longevity.
Is this not the same in nature? We don't say that a compost pile is infected when it's breaking down organic matter.
This is nature reduced down to its elements by the microscopic germs that they say make us sick. But this is ready to spring forth new life.
So you see these same processes going on in nature. And of course, when you find a dead animal in the forest and it's covered with fly larvae that are eating the carcass, nature's way of cleaning the forest floor, we don't say, oh, those darn flies killed another deer. It's silly.
So bacteria that are present in our inner terrain, is their excretion toxic to us?
If bacteria eat their normal food source, in other words, they're not eating diseased tissue or dead flesh, like, for example, in our colon, in our gut,
one of the foods the bacteria normally eat is fiber in our diet. And when they get a good amount of fiber and they're very healthy, they don't secrete any waste products that are going to be toxic to us. However, if we bombard them with toxic substances, like antibiotics, for example, well, they have toxic things in their cells. They're going to excrete them out, and then they could damage other tissue. But if we are not in a state of disease, then the secretions or excretions of the microorganisms is not going to be harmful or cause disease.
This really changes the way we look at disease, and it raises a lot of questions about contagion.
I've come to my own scientific, clinical, and personal understanding that contagion is actually a biologically unproven concept. Maybe there is some truth in the concept that, a virus is an expression of toxicity that actually can be spread through the mycelium of human connection to inspire, induce, and support the detoxing of other people, and that can look like contagion.
For example, when a plant is stressed or under drought conditions, it produces specific compounds, informational molecules, such as polyphenols, in order to transfer that information to the other plants in its group so that it can say, hey guys, I'm feeling this adversity coming. You guys need to activate resilience pathways.
Perhaps humans communicate through some sort of resonance field that for those in need, it is now time to detox. An annual natural cycle of renewal to remove built-up toxins in an imbalanced terrain.
So that might mean illness.
What we sometimes call influenza-like disease. Raising your temperature, you're sweating, you're eliminating, you're basically in a process of trying to clean house. It doesn't feel good, but ultimately it's there to generate an incredible regenerative effect. It's not to say there isn't risk involved in getting sick in this way. Some people are not going to make it. It's usually the elderly with multiple chronic diseases undergoing polypharmacy. Their detoxification pathways are shot. They aren't getting good nutrition. They don't have love in their field. And those individuals often pass on prematurely. People that are generally healthy are not as susceptible to seasonal influenza. They're not going to need that dramatic, heroic detoxification event. But those who do experience it are doing it so that they can actually clean house so they don't die suddenly of thrombosis or start developing cancer.
Nick Gonzalez told me about Keshan's disease observed in China, where cardiomyopathy was developing at seemingly epidemic rates in a certain region. And it was assumed reflexively to be infectious because that's what we're enculturated around. It's something bad that came in and did that, and it can be spread, and so we need to contain it. And ultimately, it was found to only be manifesting in regions with selenium-depleted soil because the epidemiology of it wasn't really consistent with a seeming spread of a contagion. And so it prompted investigation, which should be the case. When there is a hole in a theory, the theory should be tabled.
So it is beginning to become clear that medicine is rife with theories. One builds upon another until we venture so far from the truth that the inclination to look for it escapes us.
An antibody is really a misnomer because it's part of a view of biology that biology is a battlefield and that there are good guys fighting bad guys. But nature doesn't have good and bad guys. It only has self-correcting, self-balancing mechanisms. So when doctors say you have a virus, what they are basing that assumption on, and it is an assumption based on some theories, is an antibody test. And they will theorize that people with certain syndromes, if they find certain titers of antibodies prevalent in people's blood with those symptoms, then they will circumstantially blame those antibodies as attacking a virus they have theorized is causing the disease. AIDS, hepatitis C, Epstein-Barr, take your pick.
HIV. HIV and AIDS was the first global dogma. Every nation was under these things, everybody, And Corona is the second one, and I predicted it since long.
If you look back in medicine before HIV, antibody tests were essentially used to show that you were immune from an illness. And they were used heavily for vaccine-related immunity, but also natural immunity. So, for example, if you had the antibody to measles virus, it meant that you had already had the measles virus and had recovered, and now you have lifelong immunity. Now, when Bob Gallo invented the antibody test for HIV, another virus that doesn't exist, it totally changed how we interpret antibody tests. For the first time, now we were told that an antibody test meant that you had an illness rather than being immune from it. So almost the opposite of what we were told the meaning or significance of it was previously. And the same thing is true for the so-called antibody tests related to COVID.
Antibodies really aren't specific for a particular disease. And this is why they've been put forth to both say that someone is immune to a disease and also that someone has a disease. There just isn't that degree of specificity.
So exactly what is an antibody?
An antibody is a protein that at the tip of it has an area that non-specifically binds a range of different chemicals. And the way that antibodies are made in our body is that there's an incredible variety of different chemistry that goes into the variable ends here. But each particular antibody can bind a range of different substances. And the whole set of antibodies can practically bind any substance that might enter our body.
So what about the so-called immune system?
One of the major flaws with modern medicine is that it's compartmentalized, that we just look at one particular part of the body or one particular system. But this is a false construct. We can't separate different compartments or parts of the body like the immune system. If your immune system is unhealthy, then your body is unhealthy. And if your body is healthy, then your immune system is healthy.
And genetics theory?
DNA reflects the blueprint. It is not the actual blueprint. It reflects the electrical vectors that put the DNA into a material form in the first place. So we're thinking of things entirely backwards when we say DNA determines our genetics, our body, our physiology, or anything about us.
The DNA, which seems to be in the nucleus primarily, acts essentially as an antenna. But it's not a double helix. The water is a double helix. The DNA is just the chemicals lining the double helix of the water.
By water, Tom is referring to the cell's gel-like water, or the cytoplasm, which surrounds the nucleus. This water is home to a lot of organelles, small-like organs of the cell with important functions for our bodies, like making energy, for example.
The water is like your radio and turns inputs, light, sound, thoughts, emotions, radio waves, electromagnetic fields, chemicals, hormones, etc. Turns those inputs, if it's coherent, into proteins, no code required, and the proteins make up living systems. And that's how it works.
If we don't question these underlying fundamental theories of immunology, of genetics, of the cell architecture, then we're going to be further and further lost at sea, because each round of research and knowledge that is put forth in the mainstream is built upon a false premise. If we accepted the truth that germ theory is simply false and viruses don't cause disease, then we would not be misled. We would not be afraid that there is a weaponized virus that's been spread out into the world.
I wouldn't be surprised if they would like to create an engineered virus that would be transmissible and affect, millions and billions of people. I think there may be some interest in that. But the good news is it doesn't work like that. So you can't do it. You can make toxins and affect millions and billions negatively. But you can't make a transmissible virus because that's not how it works.
What about antibody-dependent enhancement?
Another dangerous narrative for two main reasons. Firstly, because it generates unnecessary and extreme amounts of fear. Many people who are talking about it are saying that millions of people who are vaccinated are going to die the next flu season. And then the second is because it keeps you believing in the narrative that viruses are dangerous because it's not the vaccine toxicity that's causing the problem. It has to be dependent on exposure to the deadly, dangerous virus. And then, of course, the scary fake variants. You wouldn't even have to look at the ridiculous evidence that they put forth. You would already know that it's completely false.
Andy, can I share a candid phone conversation we had about this?
Go ahead.
Let me ask you this, Marcy. You know how they say that there are these variants and that the variants are more transmissible or more severe?
Yeah.
They actually make in the laboratory what they call a pseudovirus. In other words, they take the gene sequence for this spike protein that they think is from a variant because of that genome sequencing bullshit, and they put it into a synthetic pseudovirus, the same technology as the vaccine. They essentially make a experimental vaccine with this mutated protein that they think comes from the variant. Then they infect it into a tissue culture, and then they mix antibodies. And then based on how the antibodies react with this pseudovirus that's artificially created in a laboratory, that's how they report that it's transmissible or it's severe. Now, why wouldn't they just use the virus? Why wouldn't they just take it out of all the people that are affected with the Delta and then do the antibody studies with that? Because it doesn't exist. That's why. But virologists don't talk with me, so I can ask them that question. But it's obvious. That's the answer. You know, you can't prove a negative. I can't prove to you that, no one anywhere has never done a control experiment. But I can tell you that I've looked at several hundred virology papers where they've done this isolation procedure, and not one of them ever has a control. It's not supposed to be that you do a control with one experiment, and then anytime you do the same procedure, you don't do a control. You're supposed to run a control every goddamn. If I tried to get an article published and I didn't have a control group, they would have just sent it back to me right away and say, where's your control group? It's only in this narrow field that they even allow you to submit a paper without a control. Tom and I talked to actual academic scientists. They say the most ridiculous things, like this one guy who was actually at the Wuhan Institute in China. And he says, well, these virologists are so smart. I know that they're right. That's his argument. That's his scientific argument. We ask him, why can't you isolate the virus directly from a sick person? There's not enough. So I said, okay, well, what if you have 100 people? Will that be enough? What if you have 1,000? What about 10,000? And of course, he didn't even answer. He just was like,
Are doctors and medical students encouraged to think critically?
Unfortunately, critical thinking within medical schools doesn't really exist. When you go to med school, you have to take on the dogmas that are taught to you. Otherwise, you won't pass your exams. If you talk about another idea like terrain theory, you will be laughed at.
A friend of mine, a specialist in nucleic acid, he was questioning me why I did talks and education on HIV and AIDS, because I was a full believer in this concept. And he asked me if I checked the evidence. I got a red face immediately because I realized I didn't check it. I believed it.
This is actually an incredible moment of realization that Dr. Lanka has shared with us. One of the hardest things for people to accept is that perceived authorities may just be regurgitating what they've been led to believe.
How can all these incredibly smart people have got it so wrong? particularly the last 150 years, but it actually goes way back. It's very simple. They started with a premise. Only physical substance exists. We're not basically substance. The substance is the end result of the process of water interacting with energy fields. Once you get that wrong, everything else is wrong. Everything. So it's not a matter of, well, I'm criticizing that they got some things wrong. No, they got everything wrong. The whole way of looking at it is flat out wrong.
Louis Pasteur started us on this merry-go-round that just keeps devolving not only our biological integrity, but also our level of consciousness that has been dampened down on so many levels.
Glorified as the father of germ theory, Pasteur's published diaries reveal fraud, the falsifying of results, plagiarism, ties to French aristocracy. Fast forward to the 1950s.
John Enders won the Nobel Prize for coming up with an easier way of manufacturing a polio vaccine.
But, and this is a big but, he discovered during his experiments that the cell culture died without any sick sample added. Remember the virologist's isolation experiment? This actually was the first and only control experiment until Dr. Lanka's last April. The vaccine paradigm depends on this belief system, and virologists have never been permitted to question this. So Enders' findings were kept quiet. The Nobel Prize, no doubt, helped to that end. However, many are starting to wise up.
You've issued a series of FOIA requests asking for information. Give us the rundown of the scope of that and what specifically were you asking for?
In every request, I asked for records describing the isolation or purification of the alleged COVID-19 virus, which is called SARS-CoV-2. If you look at the so-called virus isolation papers, you'll find that they do other things that they call isolation. So they'll take a patient sample and they'll put it with some monkey kidney cells and fetal bovine serum and drugs, and they call that isolation. So I specified that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about PCR tests. I wasn't asking only for records of isolation done by that institution. It could be any record that they have in their custody or control written by anybody in the world.
Like a university or someone receiving a government grant or anything.
Exactly. Because there are many research teams around the world that claim to have isolated the alleged virus. We now have responses from 137 institutions in over 25 countries. And no one to this day has provided even one record of the alleged virus having been purified from any patient sample on the planet by anyone.
The question has been asked, and what Christine has done is said, do you actually have proof that they found a virus and took it directly from nature and got it by itself so they could analyze it? Every single institution, every government, every agency, every organization, every university has replied that no, they simply do not have the evidence that this thing really exists.
I actually have some news to share. We actually started doing some freedom of information requests on other alleged viruses as well. From the CDC, they have no record of the alleged 2003 SARS virus having been purified. They have no record of any common cold coronavirus having been purified. They have no record of any HIV, any HPV, any influenza virus of any kind, any West Nile virus.
You got my attention and the attention of many people. You are uncovering what may be one of the greatest frauds in the history of Western science.
Children are particularly dangerous to stork populations.
Global warming is impacting cotton
New
production.
mandates require distancing from stork
Mask up when near nesting areas.
Meaning diaper shortages for stork baby deliveries.
The academic world is self-governing to a degree, but it's really controlled by the funding sources. So if you want to see whose interest is being served with academic research, with the mission of educating, you have to look where the money is. The largest funder of research is the federal government. The other big funder is the pharmaceutical and medical device industry. Obviously, they have a profit motive. So they're very happy with new viral diseases because each one of those is an opportunity to make a new antiviral drug. There's always been this business strategy to complement viruses with cancer because treating cancer is one of the most lucrative areas of medicine, and it's a huge annual industry in the United States. You could talk about it as a percentage of GDP. That's how big it is.
This is absolutely a fear-demic, and there is ample evidence, too, for anybody who does even cursory research that it is purposeful, a form of inducing compliance for other, let's just say, agendas.
This pandemic is not the end game, and money is not the end game. The end game is the control of the population. Whether that means eugenics, depopulation, I'm agnostic about that. I really don't know. But I do know that the control of the people is what everybody that has been lying to us and taking away our liberties is ultimately seeking. There is no example in history of a totalitarian state allowing free speech. None. So if the end goal, as I propose, of all of this pandemic nonsense is actually control, just as it is necessary to separate children from their parents to own the youth population, it is also necessary to block the dissemination of free information. Because you cannot control a population if you don't control speech and control the children. This is the historical reality throughout the 20th century of every single totalitarian government.
And epidemics play right into this, or should we say, through consent, they take hold.
To understand epidemics, you really have to step back and look at the big picture. For instance, the Spanish flu epidemic. Coincidentally, at that time, there was the introduction of a widespread electrical grid. When the herd makes an adaptation, it will go through a symptomatic phase, and then it will be followed by a period of adaptation, and then the species no longer portrays those particular symptoms.
So if you're sick, for example, and you've been exposed to the toxicant burden we all are exposed to today, we have non-native EMF blasting us moment to moment. We have biologically incompatible foods. We have the psychogenicity of profound stress and trauma. Our cells are going to be suffering, which then can lead to the production of extracellular vesicles like exosomes that contain information that may be alarming if you're exposed to it. May tell your partner that they need to activate detoxification pathways immediately because the information is being transferred to the herd so that there could be resistance within the community.
The problem is every time the herd has to make an adaptation, it's not quite as healthy because of it. It loses a little bit of its vitality and resilience. We have a greater abundance of vertical carrier waves, and those with them will carry other things into our biology, into our psyche, into our subconscious. For instance, we are being exposed to propaganda and simultaneously getting it from a source that is exposing us to these negative vertical waves. Those messages are going to create a resonance that then permeates on a very deep level of our consciousness. Now, if you take other things like chemtrails, metallic particulates in the atmosphere, they're doing several things. They control weather, our biology, and as a real nasty side effect, they deteriorate our nervous system. In my clinical career, I've seen a great escalation of neurological diseases like ALS, for instance, that were very rare, almost non-existent. Now they're becoming epidemic. There's a reason for that. The real agenda in the long run, though, is genetically modifying the human race. Everywhere you look, we're exposed to genetic modification in our foods, and vaccines are the same thing.
Fundamentally, the vaccine agenda is a war on the ability of cells to clean themselves out. Instead, They're literally injecting children and people with these toxins, preventing the child, the person, from mounting a defense to clean these toxins out of their cells, and you end up with chronically sick people. This has been shown over and over again. You end up with more cancer, more arthritis, more heart disease, more chronic illness. We see it, before 1986 when the vaccine agenda really started, 11% of the children had a chronic illness. 2017, it's 54%.
Well, with regard to the so-called COVID vaccines, I think there are really two things that we know for sure. One thing is that it's a brand new technology in the world of vaccines, and we simply don't know that much about it. And the second thing we know is that it's extremely dangerous.
Crisis in America. Deaths up 40% among those aged 18 to 64 based on life insurance claims for 2021 after COVID-19 vaccine rollouts.
There are many things that we don't know. We don't know exactly what is in it. We don't even know if the same thing is in every vial of the same brand. We don't know what the long-term effects are. We don't really know if there's any consequences for people being around others who are vaccinated. So there are many things we don't know, but we certainly know more than enough to make the decision to stay as far away from an injection as possible.
So this website called How Bad Is My Batch? You can click on, say, Pfizer and look up your lot number to see how many deaths and injuries are associated with that lot number.
Interestingly, as one scrolls down, there's a drastic drop-off in the number of deaths and disabilities.
What does this mean? Placebos?
So for there to be this much variation, this could not be simply negligence. Because, companies like Pfizer have been doing this manufacturing process for a long time. They couldn't possibly screw it up that bad. This has to be a planned effort to test different things. And unfortunately, I've learned from some pharmaceutical and FDA regulatory insiders that under the EUA status, there is allowed to be variation in the ingredients because it's still experimental and in development. So I think they use this loophole to carry this out in a clandestine manner for ill intent. So that would indicate that they're trying to spread out the deaths so to make them less obvious.
Also, it probably should be noted that they're pulling that data from VAERS, which, as we know, is underreported.
Absolutely. So, it may be a representative sample, but it certainly doesn't represent anywhere near the total number. There was one study done by Harvard Pilgrim Health where they tried to approximate how many vaccine adverse events are actually reported to VAERS, which is a voluntary system, and it's actually quite difficult to make a VAERS report. And what they found is that less than 1% of the vaccine adverse events and injuries that they found in their population were what was reported in VAERS. So you could really make an approximation by taking the VAERS numbers and multiplying by 100, and that would be a way to approximate the real number.
And what about the claim being asserted that the new injection technology is not gene therapy?
I initially likened the vaccine technology to GMO technology because the whole purpose of GMO is to take the genetic information from one organism and put it into a different organism and have that organism make a foreign gene product. In other words, make something that they don't normally make, but that is coded for in the gene. And this is exactly how these vaccines are said to work, by giving the genetic material either in the form of messenger RNA or in the form of DNA, like in the Johnson & Johnson product. And those are the instructions to make the spike protein in the recipient.
So let's fact check the fact checkers.
So this is on Moderna's website. How does mRNA differ from gene therapy? They say they take fundamentally different approaches, but it describes gene therapy and gene editing as altering original genetic information that the cell carries to produce a permanent fix to the underlying genetic problem by changing the defective gene. So in other words, instead of repairing the defective gene, it's replacing it with another gene. So the International Immunology Journal, development of COVID-19 vaccines utilizing gene therapy technology. Anytime that we're altering or hacking the genetic machinery of a natural organism, that is genetic tomfoolery, whether we call it therapy or not.
So what do you think about all of this, Jason?
There's no going back now. You can't unknow what you know. From what I've been able to understand about the way things really work, it's all about frequency, and consciousness guides frequency.
You know what comes to mind when you say that? That famous tuning fork experiment.
Where they strike one tuning fork, say an F sharp, and another F sharp will vibrate because it's the same frequency?
Yeah, exactly. You know, speaking of resonant frequencies, I just met Veda Austin. In fact, just a couple of days after she announced her engagement.
She communicates with the consciousness of water, right? Similar to Dr. Emoto's work?
Yes. I showed Andy a couple of examples of some images she got around her COVID inquiry.
So, of course, I could interpret this a certain way. What I see are fingerprints and what looks like the head of a worm. Like the fingerprints are the mark of the people responsible for creating this fake pandemic. And the worm may represent the true association of atypical pneumonia, because we've seen that antiparasitic drugs that work on worms, parasites like ivermectin, are very successful. Can you describe how she prepared these?
Yeah, she just takes a Petri dish.
I would simply just get my Petri dish of the water that had helped heal my body, and I would set some kind of an intention, and I would freeze it, and I would see what happened. I started to take influences. For example, I can take a photograph of a person, and I put the Petri dish of water on top of that photograph, and it will show the person's face, that person's features, and each one is relative to that photo. I asked the water, I said, "Do you know who I am?" And then I froze the water, and I was flabbergasted because there was this VA in the ice. My name is Veda Austin. The actual initials of my name were linked in the exact same way that I link my initials naturally. I have used all kinds of words. I wrote the word angel, and this beautiful angel formed in the shape of a woman with these wings. I drew the number 4, and I got the number 4 in the ice.
I'll tell you, that second picture is really interesting because I'm going to guess that Veda has not looked at those images or has not read those studies, or has she?
"25 years ago, I was in a really serious car accident. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver was decapitated. It was considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. 3 doctors told me that I would never be able to have children. So I had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't, because I hate being told what I can't do. So over the course of 20 years, I had 8 operations. I didn't recover very well, and I had showers of blood clots in my lungs. And so I spoke to a friend of mine who was a medical doctor, but also practiced Ayurvedic medicine. And he recommended that I find a natural source of high alkaline water. He said that it might be able to get my body back into some kind of balance. I didn't really know what to expect at all, but eventually what happened was that a client of mine said, I know this old guy, he's got his own private source of very alkaline water out of a very deep underwater aquifer. He's only giving it to cancer patients. He might give you some. So I'm like, oh God, yeah, definitely sign me up. After about 10 days, I had all these little bumps coming up along my arm and along my jaw that were really painful. And I knew my body was detoxing something. Over the course of day 10 and day 12, 27 pieces of glass came out of my arm and my jaw, and they were from the car accident that I was in 20 years prior. This particular water that I was drinking had not only a higher frequency, a higher electrical charge, a higher pH, a higher amount of clarity, but it also had its own vibration, its own frequency. We all have our own individual piece of music that every single cell in our body is playing like an orchestra. And when I drank this water, it was almost as if it gave my body an entirely new type of song that my cells registered, understood, and absorbed. And it restructured them, it rearranged them so that I have this new orchestra playing in my body. It was almost as if this type of water had gone into my cells and hit such a high note that all the glass that was in me was pushed out.
Everything we are taught is this reductionist, materialist paradigm of everything's a particle, everything's physical in the material world. But here we're talking about that that's not all there is, right? That there is this other unseen, non-material part, and it has a lot of influence, and perhaps it may really be guiding the material world. We just talk about it as being an emergent property, or when it's perhaps the most significant thing that there is for health.
With waveform physics, you're really acknowledging that thoughts are things. Every single thought that we have creates an event, an electrical event, and a polarization. And that polarization in turn creates a vibration, just like a static guitar string. Emotions give the velocity for those electrical forces to pop into manifestation in the first place.
So if every thought we have, every word we speak or write, every intent seeks resonance with the matching frequency, then we are responsible for everything we create.
Everything.
For me, water is a spiritual teacher. The glass of water that you drink, you can look at it and think, well, it's just a glass of water. Well, that glass of water has been through the clouds, it has been through the trees, it has been through your ancestors and everybody else's ancestors. When somebody passes on, what leaves? The human body is only left with bones and then eventually dust. The fluid, the water, it leaves, it evaporates. It's always reincarnating. It doesn't die. It can be polluted, but it's always in one of its phases. So if we are made up of so much water, then what happens to us? Even when you're cremated, the water leaves and ashes, the ashes of cremation are actually salts. We are an ocean. We are liquid crystal beings.